So when I'm thinking about TED as a brand, the byline idea is worth spreading. It's not the idea, it's the worth spreading. What's going to get someone to lean in and go, that is that is quite remarkable. Otherwise, you end up just talking at people. It's kind of like going to a dinner party with complete strangers, sitting next to that stranger and going, let me talk at you for the next 18 minutes. You'll be fascinated.
Jon Yeo, welcome to the Speaker Driven Business Podcast. I am so happy to have you with us in this conversation today.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. We've been discussing this for a little while and we finally got there.
Yeah, discussions, false starts, but we're all on track and we're ready to roll.
We're determined. We're determined.
So, Jon, actually, one of the reasons I reached out to you, number one, you're a good human, but also you're really well known in certain spaces for your work with TEDx Melbourne. And that's been quite a journey, and all journeys start somewhere. So I'd love to get an idea and a sense of how that journey started and what was the catalyst for moving in this direction.
Sure. Was this my personal journey or the TEDx journey?
Both. Like, let's weave
Okay.
them.
All right. I'll go back to the origin story. I'm not naturally a good communicator. I'm an introvert. If you do any of those psychographic profiles, I'm
Yep.
not an introvert. I'm like off the scale over there, introvert.
Why do you think I like podcasting? Total
Yeah,
introvert.
exactly. And so, yeah, I'm shy in nature. And then there is a cultural overlay around speaking up against people that are more senior for you. And I was a very, very junior IT person back in the 90s, trying to convince a CEO that Y2K was actually a thing. So I wouldn't get necessarily an invitation to a meeting, but he had to walk past my cubicle on the way to his office. And so I got really good at these short sound bites at a level he could understand that got his attention. And so, yeah, so over that time, ended up living in London, had to take traders' machines for at least 45 minutes. The problem being that
Hang on a minute, on a stockbroking trading floor.
Yes.
Okay, so 45 minutes is like slitting their wrists.
Yeah, every 15 minutes they didn't have their machine, they were losing £1 million.
Okay.
So it
I'm
was
glad I didn't
cheaper.
have your job.
Yeah, it was cheaper for them to sack me than to spend another 15 minutes trying to solve their computer problems. So I got really good. And these were not standard machines. Like these were bespoke, customized machines. That was white computer. The Excel spreadsheet, just the Excel spreadsheet on a server class machine on his desk took 20 minutes to save. That's how complicated it was.
Wow. Okay. So
So
serious
these
IT
were
work.
very, very complicated machines. Probably trying to do more than they were really designed for. But I mean, when you're trying to find an edge in that game, money's no object, right? So again, how do you get someone's attention? How do you keep their attention? How do you let them realize the significance of what, is about to come? So sort of cut my teeth in there. And then I was lucky enough in about 2009, sorry, to be part of the TEDx Melbourne community. And I was back from London at this point, and the previous organizer had to decide whether she was going to organize the next TEDx Melbourne or her wedding.
Okay, big decision.
So yeah, so it kind of landed on my lap. But one of the benefits of that is I could see all the TED Talk data. Back then, you could see all the raw data for all the
Okay.
videos. And so I could see when someone would pause, rewind, or abandon a video.
Wow. Okay. So that would have got your attention because of your background, analysis, IT,
Exactly.
programming. It would have immediately got your attention, I'm assuming.
Exactly. So rewound at 30 seconds, worked out what they did or said,
Mhm.
and then built statistical models for influence.
Statistical models. Sorry, you just broke my
Yes.
brain.
Yeah.
You built statistical models for influence. So this was based on
Yeah.
what you were seeing happening on these videos.
Yes.
What can I just ask a question? What possessed you to create a statistical model for what you were seeing?
Look, mostly because I'm a colossal nerd, but I was genuinely interested for my own benefit because I still didn't feel I had a handle. I had this school of hard knocks. I had this instinct, but I couldn't justify why it was correct. And so I had to find out why. And I've always been, that's my brain anyway. Like I'm always trying to understand why something happens. I actually did organizational behavior when I did a business degree because I was genuinely interested in what caused someone to do something. And so organizational behavior was kind of the nearest thing to that. And so this was really in that domain, but specifically around speaking and influence and communication.
So when you built this model, tell me about this model because you did just break my brain. Tell me about the model and what you built and what it gave you.
So I I've now learned since then that I was exploring what's called first principles, which is what are the elements that cause something to work, but if you actually remove even one of them, the whole thing's broken. So, the analogy I like to use today is if you think about a car, if I go think about a car, and you probably think Ferrari, you might think Toyota, you might think something in between, and you kind of go, well, what makes them all interesting or relevant or common? Most people put them into generalized categories, utes or four-wheel drives or sports cars. But when I think about it, I think about brake, accelerator, steering wheel, four wheels, and a drive unit. And so whether you've got a Ferrari or a Toyota, they all have those five things. If one of those things doesn't work, the car doesn't work. So how do you break your idea down so it's so simple that anyone will understand how you got there, and then with a little bit of common sense, work out, well, then if you could reconstruct yourself in your world, what does that mean to them? And so communication is very much about how you create meaning, not how you transfer information. Because we have the internet to transfer information, emails, websites, and whatnot. It's about the meaning we create in that communication that became interesting to me. And I kind of discovered, oh, there's a human side to this. And this is kind of my OCD kind of introverted self going, oh, there's a logical way to create sense for people.
I love that. So this was as you're taking over, you hadn't made a decision yet, you were considering the opportunity. Like, where did this fall?
I was probably at that point about, I'm going to say at least a year in, where I had people who I was accepting on my stage, and they said, well, and most of these people, a great many of them are not professional speakers. They're just people who've got an idea. Some of them never spoken in their lives. And so it was really kind of along the lines of, well, what do you reckon I should do? Or what's your advice here? And I'd kind of say, try this or try that. And I realized that I was going from that instinct, but I wasn't really able to justify it. So some people would take that advice, some people wouldn't. But when I had the statistical model, and they said, I'm going to do this, I go, you can do that. There's a 50% chance that won't work. The choice is up to you, but this is the way that I've seen it work. And so we're able to identify that. And because I could control the event, I could control the speaker, I could control the stage, I can control as many variables as I could. The only thing that I could then measure at the end was the outcome, which TED is compulsory rule around what's called a net promoter score. Um, so hopefully your audience knows what net promoter score is. You can Google that if you want. But effectively, we were able to get, most people are happy with 0. 20 is generally pretty good. We were at 55, and then we were able to almost overnight bring it into the high 90s.
So this bit fascinates me because whilst I'm laughing at your introverted, nerdy OCD brain, I also love data and I love measurement. So I love because I really, really love this improvement that you made, and we're going to really unpack some of that today. Was it being able to control all those elements and actually have a predictable, sustainable, almost repeatable approach and process? Was that what really made the difference?
Well, again, in my optimizing brain, because that's what I did in IT, always said, well, what else could we do? What else would I need to know? What are the variables I'm playing with? Again, coming back to the first principles, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that I could really focus on that give us the biggest bang for buck? And I would just focus on that. And eventually I was able to narrow down the variables and also control the scope of those variables. And yes, TED gave me the ultimate end-to-end solution in there. It became a sandbox for me.
Yeah. So when you said, like zero in on the focus, so when you look at the end result, the like almost doubling that NPS overnight, What were those one or two levers that really made that difference?
Yeah, it depends on so this is where there's a bit of subtlety. There's online versus offline, or in person. Different variables in there. So one variable, while the variables are the same, the impact of those variables is different. So what we were doing is when we were taking the Net Promoter Score, you have quantitative data. When you take and anyone who's, by the way, people with Net Promoter Score, everyone's seen one. It's one of those out of 10, would you recommend our product or service? And then the second question underneath that is, why did you say that? And so there you've got qualitative data. And so we're able to class the qualitative data to pre-event, during the event, post-event. And then within the pre-event, these are things that were evident. During the event, these were things that were evident. Post, these were things. And then we'd sort of say, well, okay, let's do one thing from the beginning. Let's do something, pre. Let's do one thing on the day, and then let's do one thing on the post. And that way the team, rather than trying to focus on 1,000 different things that potentially might contribute, it gave everyone focus on the one thing that brought the team together, brought the focus together.
That's powerful in itself. Yeah, that's what really put it together. I know there's going to be a lot of people listening, and I'm going to ask some questions just around the people listening who think that they want to do a TED Talk. If we can go there first, and then I want to come back to some of the data. But because so many people have a TEDx talk on their bucket list, and I'm like, I'm not going to actually say out loud what I internally say with that. And a lot of people, obviously, in the world that you and I move in, it's definitely on their bucket list. So for those people who've got on their vision boards, got on their bucket list, have to do before I die, what is it you want to say to them? Let's start there.
Yeah, look, I think not every talk is a TED Talk, although many great talks are worth listening to. And so I think, and then the other important element is that TED is a platform for ideas, not a platform to make a case. So, for instance, how to get better at sales will never be a TEDx talk.
Because it's a process and knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about TED as a brand, the byline idea is worth spreading. It's not the idea, it's the worth spreading. What's going to get someone to lean in and go, that is quite remarkable. Otherwise, you end up just talking at people. It's kind of like going to a dinner party with complete strangers, sitting next to that stranger and going, let me talk at you for the next 18 minutes. You'll be fascinated. And that just
That's so many speeches, full stop,
this is
not just
what
TEDx.
but we can't afford to do this in speaking, and we particularly can't do it for video on TED because if they're not interested in the video, they just click next.
Click next, yeah, and you're gone.
And so, as much as it's known for its stage presentations, it's the video that adds the value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is one of the things that I do speak to clients who are talking about. It's like, yes, you have to get the stage, and then you have to be good enough to get the video and be on the platform. And it's not just about the stage, like actually think beyond that. And people come back to me and say, oh, I've thought about my outfit. I'm like, no, you need to actually go back to the coach and talk about your idea in your speech. When it comes to the idea, what makes an idea TED worthy?
The way I simplify it is it's remarkable outside of your industry or area of expertise.
Oh, okay. Tell me
A
more.
complete stranger's got to look at this random video that someone sent them and go, oh, that's cool. It's not unlike a newspaper. There's a whole bunch of articles on the front page. None of them are related to each other. And you've got to be able to read the first paragraph in both those articles or whichever number of articles you read, and it's got to make sense the moment you read that paragraph. Because if the headline's got your attention and the paragraph doesn't grab you, they're just not going to read the rest of the article.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We just had Jason Knight presenting at a conference, and he talked about you are a newspaper. Your headline, you need your sub paragraph, and then you actually get people to listen to you. So I love that you actually brought that through. When you're actually working with people and you've seen that there's this genesis of an idea that's probably worth sharing, because a lot of people that you work with may not have spoken before, as you mentioned when we first opened. How do you approach that? Question number one, because we're all used to working with people who want to speak and get on stage. And there may be a lot of people out there whose holdback is that they haven't actually spoken before. Where do you start with a process with someone who actually hasn't either A, considered or been just never done? Where do you start?
I think it's the caliber of the idea. And so the remarkable outside of your industry expertise, that's the first thing. The second part, deeply related, if they can't articulate that idea in a single compelling sentence, it's not clear in their head. And the challenge with that is if it's not clear in your head, it can't be clear in the audience's head.
Yeah, you can't
And
communicate it.
exactly. And given that these talks are very, very short, there's no room for waffle. If you have, let's say, 10-minute talk and you waffle for, say, 5 minutes, that's half your talk. As opposed to a keynote where if you're on the stage for, say, 60 minutes, 45 minutes, 5 minutes, proportionally speaking, is immaterial. But I mean, we have to work in, I'm going to say 20, 30-second blocks.
And is it the idea that each 20 or 30-second block, kind of like when you write a book, each chapter has to get the reader to read the next chapter? Each little 30-second block needs to get the person to the next 30-second block. Is
Yeah,
that the kind of approach?
yeah, there is. Yeah. And there's multiple ways you can do that, obviously. But yes, that's in summary, yes. I like to summarize it as the ability to say the right thing at the right time to the right person in the right way. And each of those needs to be met in each of those segments.
Yeah. When it comes to TED Talk, I'm going to ask a couple of really technical questions and they just popped into my head. Um, so the first thing is you are talking about 18 minutes. That is the original length. A lot of stages are doing faster ones now and shorter ones now. Where is Melbourne landing?
I haven't done an 18 for a long time. The max I'll give is probably 12 these days. So I'll try and keep it simple. 2019 and 2020, the abandon rate, sorry, for TED Talks halved. So you're already gone from 18 to 9 at that point. And then from 2021 to 25 this year, it halved again.
So literally 4.5 minutes.
4.5 minutes is as long as someone will be patient with you before they click next, which means you need to be able to bring your segments to really tight, really crisp, really compelling. That doesn't mean you get a 4.5 minute talk. It means you can't afford to be boring
In that first bit.
in that window.
Yeah. Wow. So there's actually a lot less tolerance as such. And the other thing is the 18 minutes, the traditional TED Talk structure, there is a lot of, I guess, rules and boundaries around how we put a TED Talk together. How do you actually stick to that and allow people to flourish and be brilliant at the same time?
Yeah, I liken it to more guide rails and rules. It's kind of like a traffic light. Everyone hopes that everyone agrees that what red means. We all agree red is red. And
Yeah.
we all agree that that white line down the middle, we decide we're going to drive on this side of the road, not the other side of the road. So they're guidelines. There's no rules to say how you get from A to B. There's infinite creativity in getting from A to B, but we all got to agree that where the safety boundaries, you've got to stick to them.
Yeah. Okay. And for anyone who's thinking they can just, because I've seen it even in some of the work that I did, we did some work around this a couple of years ago now. For anyone who thinks that they're just going to break the rules and do it their own way anyway, what do you say?
Look, I will always have a good, vigorous conversation. I'll always measure it against my data. And then if
Yeah.
I have a case, we have a conversation.
Yeah. Love it.
But it's about being deliberate in your outcomes, not
Mm.
necessarily strict on how you deliver it.
Yeah. Love that. That distinction, deliberate and outcomes and not delivery, is really powerful. We've been touching on the ideas and things like that, and needs to be an idea worth spreading. It's not just your experience, it's not just your story, it's not just your process, it's not a Venn diagram.
No.
Um, how have you coached yourself to actually be able to hear that hidden potential, that genesis of something great? Because you've been with Melbourne TEDx now, is it 2009, 2010?
Yeah, we started in 2009, so
Yeah. So
16.
there would be, I'm thinking thousands, if not tens of thousands of pitches and applications and conversations. How
Mhm.
have you coached yourself to hear that hidden potential?
it still comes down to remarkable outside of industry or expertise. So they might not be a great communicator. They might not have a clear sense of exactly where they want to take it. But there's always a nugget of this is interesting. This has got some curiosity to it. And the way I test that, first of all, is the first principles. To what degree can they get it simple? And they don't have to have it complete, but they've got to be going that direction. But to answer your question in terms of what's going to make that pop, there's something called a second order consequence. It's a consequence of a consequence. It's how do people, in the speaking world, you might call that future pacing. How do you get people to see what you see from their point of view in their context, but with your language?
I love that. One of the things that we do talk about is what is your vision of the world that is possible if that idea were true?
Yeah,
And what you just said, so it's their experience and their lens, but in your language.
yeah,
Is that
yeah.
the hardest part of pulling it together?
Yeah, I would say yes, because most people don't think about second order consequences as a general rule. We're taught maths, what's the next logical step? We're taught in business, what's the next logical step? When we might go into visioneering or mission, but they are less concrete. Second order consequence is almost mathematical. So the example I like to give there is I live in the city of Yarra, and 20 years ago, 50% of its revenue came from car parking fines. And so I said to them at the time, what happens when self-driving cars come along? And they get it, but I still don't think they've completely solved that problem. But the city of Melbourne, for instance, 34% of its parking, sort of its footprint is car parking space. What happens when that land suddenly becomes available? What does it mean for land price and land tax? What does it mean for the city of Yarra, where I live, which is inner city Melbourne, which is basically next door to the city? If you didn't have to pay high prices for a box, but you could live in the country and sleep on the way in, why would you choose to live in inner city Melbourne? So what does it mean for public transport and traffic density? And then if you think about the rural areas, hospitals, supermarkets, and sewage all get impacted if suddenly in the next 10 years people go, I'm just going to go bush. So one small thing has such massive repercussions. And it's about helping people see the repercussions, the consequence of the consequence that then becomes the important factor.
So when it comes to the consequence of the consequence and thinking about all this experience over 15, 16 years now, what's the best example that you have of that? Or what's the example of that that you love the most? The speech, the
Oh,
idea? And I
yeah.
know I'm trying not to ask you about favorite children.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's the thing that really got your attention the first time you heard it and proved the second consequence
Yeah.
theory?
So one that sort of comes to mind was a fellow who came to me and said, look, first of all, he was a Nigerian gun runner. So he would ship money and passports between North Korea and Nigeria. So quite an interesting premise to begin with. He goes, oh, I tried to hand myself in and the police ignored me. I said, okay. And he goes, I want to tell people about that. I went, okay, so which bits do you think people will be interested in or relate to, or how would you explain this? And yeah, it got a bit complicated. And we came to the idea that, okay, how are we going to make this sort of contextually relevant for our audience? So he was telling me about how he evades police dogs and helicopters and all sorts of things. And fascinating in its technical sense,
Yeah, yeah.
but really it's just
Not a
lots
big
of
idea.
interesting stories.
Big experience, big story, not a
Yeah,
big idea so much. Yeah.
sure. So I said to him, look, we need to have something that people can sort of follow through this, not just a whole bunch of nice little anecdotes. And I said, well, what happens? Tell me more about what happens in this scenario. He goes, well, I didn't mean to get into crime. I said, what happened? He goes, well, my parents got divorced. They didn't tell me. But I was at a private school, so they couldn't agree on who was going to pay the school fees. So the teacher just came up to me and said, look, your parents have stopped paying. You can't keep coming. And he wanted to stay in school, obviously. So what he would do is at night, he would rob cars to raise money. And I said, and so what happens then? And he goes, well, eventually I just kind of ended up being more senior, more senior, more senior until I was in charge of the whole thing. And so I said, well, what was that like? He said, you've you, you've got to understand that even within there, there's rules. I said, like what? He goes, well, you can't exploit the poor. You can't. What was the other thing? If you say you're going to do something, you've got to do it no matter what. And do not exploit. Do not exploit women, children, poor. If you say you're going to do something, you've got to do it. And what was the third one? Gosh, it's slipped my mind. And that was going to be the byline, and I can't remember it. So how about we come back to because I know it's going to come in my
Absolutely.
subconscious. But there were three things that really resonated, and I thought that's it. That's what you have to do.
So how did that turn into the idea?
That's the bit because it was those three things when they came together that suddenly everything could relate to. Let me just have a quick think about this for a second. Women and children. Okay, yes. If you say you're going to do something, you've got to do it. That was the first one. So I said, well, imagine if the whole world worked like that. If you say you're going to do something and you've got to do it, if you didn't exploit women and children of the poor, and if someone asks for help, you've got to help them. Imagine if the whole world operated that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In
Oh,
fact, and
wow.
so we decided to call the talk Respecting the Criminal Code, which is kind
Oh, wow. What a twist. Sorry, I'm just
yeah,
like, I'm blown away. I'm going to go and find it now.
yeah. So we found something that was universally relevant, that was sort of easy to recognize but universally accepted. But in certain contexts, you wouldn't have expected it to come from there.
No, not at all.
And that's the bit, that's the second order consequence. That's the bit from the side that becomes remarkable. That's the worth spreading bit of the idea.
Yeah,
And you've got to
that's
unpack that
so how often do you have to unpack to that level?
every single time
Tell me more about that.
because you've got to pressure test an idea.
Yeah, okay.
Because if it doesn't stand up to scrutiny in our discussions, there's going to be someone who's more qualified or more experienced or more knowledgeable who's going to pick a hole in it. So I need to be stricter than my audience. I need to know as much about that concept or idea as that audience. And in many cases, a lot of the time, I could probably do their talk.
Mm. Is that because the way that you unpack it with them, then shape it, then coach? Because you actually coach
Yeah.
them, don't you?
I do. I do. For the ones who want to be coached, not everyone wants to be or needs to be coached. For everyone, I always offer, and X number will percentage will accept, depending on the year, be more or less. And then we go through everything with a fine tooth comb. We literally go down to senses and words and tone and dynamic. And like we literally pick the cadence of everything. We pick the words, we pick the moment building because it's it's not about the content, it's about the meaning they get from the content.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we've got to find a way that make each word count and make each moment land. And it's not just going, then I did this, then I did this, I know this, here's an interesting stat. Because then it's just fact sharing. And fact sharing, you can do it in an email, you can do it on a website.
Yeah. Actually, that's probably a hot tip for everyone to take away. If you can do it on an email or on a website, you're not worthy of a TED stage. um, that cadence and that rhythm and that really unpacking and deep diving it, what are the first principles of that for you?
Uh, so there's the content itself. That's the logic and the order and the simplicity. There's the context, the ability to say the right thing at the right time. And there's the intent, which is saying it to the right person the right way. In other words, it doesn't mean something if they don't trust you, if they don't believe you, if you haven't built trust and rapport. It doesn't matter how good the idea is, it won't fly. And so you've got to have content and context, but overarching that, the belief that people are going to sit and listen to you for X minutes and not hit the close button. So this is where integrity and authenticity and all those other key human attributes then become an important part of your message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the unpack. I love the way that you actually just walked us through that with the Nigerian guy. It reminds me of someone we met. We were at Influence in the US last year, which a lot of people know is one of the biggest speaking conferences in the world. And we were at one of the events that happen around it. And I met a guy who was breaking into speaking, and he was the top profiler in the FBI. So, for those that don't know, profilers like look after serial killers, drug cartels, all that sort of stuff. And he's not attached to any one base because they have to be able to drop him wherever they need him. He's like literally the best. And he said, I tested it out and I've got my few testimonials and I've got them on LinkedIn. And I said, well, tell me about that. Tell me about the first speech. And he's like, yeah, well, he said, someone said, do it amongst people that you already know and gather a whole heap of people together. And he said, so I did that. And he said, I just happened to have to go to Colombia and do it with all the drug cartel overlords because they all know me. So half of his LinkedIn recommendations are from drug cartel bosses. And it was just like, but I said, but what is it? And it's the same thing. It's like people, it was very similar to that angle you came up. So his actual keynote is along those same lines, that flip of the best business minds in the world may well be the criminal minds. And so, yeah, but it just reminded me of exactly the same thing. We're talking about cash in passports. And he's like, yeah, I had to pull them all together and we had to go to Colombia because Mexico was too close to the US border. I was like, this is sensational. When you think about how people show up on your stages and how and the impact it gives them, I'm going to start with how they show up. What are some of the things that you notice in how people show up and how they're ready for stages? And is there any nuances between cultural ethnicities, English as a second language, gender, like all of that sort of stuff? Like, what are you front row to when it comes to that?
And they're all the subtleties I was referring to outside of the core principles that become particularly relevant. And I would argue you almost need to lean into because they are points of distinction. They're the flourishes above the narrative that become your unique fingerprint on the story you're sharing. I'm under no aspersions that I'm the only speaker coach on the planet, for instance, or communication coach on the planet. But what is that distinction I need to let people know and understand? For me, it's the data. And so the fact that I'm shy meant I was forced to find very specific ways to overcome that. And I'm introverted, I had to come up. So they become the distinctive elements. So I would almost go so far as to say, embrace all those distinctions and find a way to make them the part of the fabric of your message.
Mm. I do really lean into that as well. I remember working with a woman about 6 or 7 years ago from a speaking perspective, not just TED stage, and Italian, vibrant, hands everywhere, really fast Italian rolling accent. And she actually cried when our first session because at the end of it, she said, so who should I get for an accent coach? And I was like, why are we getting an accent coach? And she was like, well, I know that I need to slow down my hands and slow down and really work on my accent. But why? You are vibrant, vivacious. And so we just worked it in, right? But she actually cried because every single person she'd been to already was like, we've got to get that out of you, right? Your hands move too fast, your mouth moves faster. We've got to get that out of you. And it was like, to me, it was her superpower and her entrancement. So I love hearing that from you. One of the things that I really leaned into recently, and I love your work, that well, I hope you know that. But one of the things I really leaned in recently was you did a post earlier this year, but when we talk about being witness to, and there's the flourishes and superpowers, but sometimes it doesn't matter how much you believe in someone, they still struggle to get on the stage. Talking particularly about women and young adults, right? And what actually keeps them from taking to the stage. I'm just wondering, are you okay to go there at the moment? Because I think it's a really important part of the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it was, and this is really interesting. In the very, very early days, people often, and this is like 2009, 10, people go, wow, you've got so much diversity on stage. And I was genuinely stunned by that because all I'm thinking is, well, I've gone to find the best ideas I can and put them on stage. I see no connection to that being even remotely connected to race or gender or age or background. Like I was looking for the best idea. So if you're looking for the best idea, by definition, it has to be diverse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was a little confused originally. And then I started to go, well, of course, I went and looked at the data. I found that,
Naturally.
yeah, I was asking twice as many women to be on my stage to get gender parity when I
Oh,
eventually
wow.
did start to be a bit more deliberate about this. And then even when they did accept, 30% of them would not finish the development process. When I'd sort of tapped out sort of the low-hanging fruit and I was then deliberately going out and reaching out, and this is kind of a good number of years in, I found that this was my biggest challenge. It's like, well, okay, how do I get people and this organization and this brand over the line? So it was about really, well, what are the underpinnings of that? And again, my brain goes, well, let's go back to first principles. Where are they coming from? What's the process they're going through? How do we step them through? And I realized that it was less about the ideas at that point, but more about the psychology or the state people are in and the psychology that they have that impact their ability to sort of stand up to the plate and have a good swing at the ball when it comes to them. And so I became sort of a part sociologist slash psychologist in the development process. And so that kind of overcame that.
So what was the most fascinating part of what you discover with that? Like you work out first principles, you go back into it, you bring that into the process and the development stage and what you do and how you work. What was the most fascinating part of that to come out of it for you?
I mean, I'm lucky I get to meet with fascinating people anyway, but what particularly became evident was how unique each circumstance was. But invariably there was, I'm going to say, qualities or maybe even archetypes of thinking that became sort of a little bit common. And so it's like, okay, this type of scenario, these are the types of thinking that happen, or this context. So for instance, business people had a certain way of solving problems. People who've been in physical bliss or in a war zone or had sort of some traumatic had certain ways that they got through things. And so they became sort of categories of thinking. And then I thought, well, what's the similarity in those categories? And I distilled it down again. But I had to have a larger body of work to find the distinctions. And so I think over the 16 years I've run in TEDx Melbourne, it's my ability, it's almost to the point where I'm not going to say it's instinctive, but you kind of know because you've seen that many variances and variables.
Yeah, I love that it's actually a pattern because we do discover the same thing here. One of the reasons why we've changed how we do things is because actually 80% of it is covered in certain ways, right? It's the same recurring mindset strategies, mind blocks that we see coming through. So I love that you've actually put data behind. I just go with
Yeah.
gut. John
Yeah.
brings data.
Well, also works, right? It's not a discount there. It's just that that's the way I reconcile it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then how did you bring that into coaching someone who has got this resistance because of some sort of way of thinking?
Regardless of the background, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the current situation, my primary objective is to get them absolute clarity and unwavering self-belief. And so if that's my endpoint, then I need to then prioritize which aspects. And sometimes it might be working on their craft. Sometimes it might be working on their psychology. Sometimes it might be refining their content. Invariably, it's all three, and invariably, you kind of prioritize different things at different times. But the endpoint doesn't change. And so, with that in mind, and given I know the endpoint, and given I know where their starting point is, and I have in hindsight also the experience now, it's really just stewarding them through
That process.
that process.
And the next question that just came to mind, I don't want names as such, but has there ever been anyone that really broke your heart that you couldn't get them to that point of belief that they were standing on your stage and delivering?
Um, I never give up on anyone, but a lot of people give up on themselves.
Where does your ability to not give up on anyone, where does that come from?
Because I'm pretty clear on the end point. I know I wouldn't have selected it in the first place if I didn't think they were capable of doing it. Simple as that. And so, do you discover shortfalls in certain areas? Yeah, all the time. But if you've almost got to believe in them more than they believe in themselves.
Yeah, steal your belief until they have their own.
Yeah. And because of that endpoint, and because I know the timeline, I know the count back approximately how long it's going to take to get there or what steps it take to get there, I can then give them clarity. Okay, I know you think it's kind of at this point. Let's say they think it's 2 out of 10, but it's actually, say, 5 out of 10. Or they're actually at 2 out of 10 and they really should be at 7 out of 10 at this point in time. Rather than me going, you're at 2, you need to be 7, I just go, well, what do we need to do to get to 3? How soon can we get to 3? What is realistic in 3?
Yeah. What's this
And
next step look like?
yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's a little bit consultative
Yeah.
and it's a little bit directed, depending
Mm-hmm.
on what they need. Some people
Yeah.
some people need support, some people need clarity.
Yeah. It just depends on the individual, doesn't it? When you actually think about these 16 years, for you personally, what's the thread you draw across? So what's your through line from those 16 years?
I'm continually humbled by what people are able to do and achieve, and what I should have been doing 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, how things would have been different today for me. So I learn and get just as much out of the experience today as I did from day one.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you most grateful for from this experience?
The privilege of being able to speak to anyone about something that really is important to them.
I love that so much. I almost wish we could just mic drop it there. Because it is a privilege when you hear people's stories and ideas and experiences and the way that their expression of that can actually impact the fabric of the world, right? It is absolutely a privilege. When you think about TEDx and what's the world and there are some shifts to TEDx content and things like that, what is it you hope that the TED stage never loses?
I'd almost say, to its detriment, TED has never wavered from being a place that's open-minded, optimistic, and future-focused. And even to today, it sits on those values and won't budge a moment. And to me, the heart of the brand. Now, Ted's not explicitly used those words, but that's the easiest way I can distill it down.
Yeah. The when it comes to as a licensee and you are heading up one of the more successful TEDx stages, there's my understanding from the outside looking in is that there are gatherings of you guys, right? You get together, the TED pull you into New York and places like that. There's gatherings. What is it that you love about those gatherings with other licensees, with TED themselves? Like, what is it that fills your cup from that? If it does, I'm assuming that it
Yeah,
does.
it totally does. I wouldn't be doing it because
16
it's
years.
voluntary, right? This is
Yeah.
I don't do this because I get a kickback from it. So because it's open-minded, optimistic, and future focused, you can walk in a room and you can have everyone believe in you from the moment, like anything is possible.
How does that feel? Because
It's
most people would
awesome.
never experience that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like going into a giant, I'm not going to call it a mastermind, but kind of a bunch of people with such extraordinary experience and wisdom that you could do the most outrageous 10, 20, 30-year goal. And they go, oh, that makes sense. Have you thought about this theory? Or I think you should meet this person. Like, it's kind of like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Good.
let's go.
Yeah, let's get on with it. You know? So
That would be, is that freeing or daunting?
it stretches my mind. So it's equal parts both, but
Yeah.
always kind of like doing intense exercise, always satisfying at the end.
No matter what the process is to
Yeah.
get there. Love that. Everyone has their favorite talks, and I'm not saying that
Yeah.
you need to pull this from Melbourne, but which of the TED Talks really have had your attention over the years?
I think Derek Sivers, Sivers, has 3 talks that are always consistently good and long enough yet short enough. I think his longest talk's like 4 minutes. Um, but they're all first principle based, and they're all deeply insightful or profound, and they're all very unassuming. And I think even Derek would acknowledge they're not necessarily, from an artisan perfect delivery point of view, the best caliber speech you'd ever hear. But the insights and thinking underneath it are just absolutely fantastic. There's another guy, and I've got his face in my head, but I cannot remember his name. And it's this the one that sticks out. He's done a few again, but the one that everyone should be able to remember is how to tie your shoelaces.
Yes, I love that one.
It's a great talk. The
It
way he
is the
engages with
best.
the community, the way he keeps his language simple, the way he delivers it is just fantastic.
Yeah.
He also has another talk, why X is the unknown factor in mathematics.
Oh,
So
I want to go and
yeah,
find that.
yeah. So that's the same guy. And so again, it's something that's principle based. It's kind of like if you could think about a simple idea in a completely new way and grow extraordinarily or infinitely from that, and it took you 5 minutes, why wouldn't you watch it?
Oh, yeah, you would, right? You
Simple as that.
absolutely would. And I think for everyone listening, even if you don't want a TEDx talk, I think it's really important. We've got media training coming into one of our programs next week. And a lot of them are like, I don't know if I ever want to do media. I'm like, no, it's the process of understanding how to communicate with media that we want you to take away. And it's the same thing here. Like if you can actually articulate an idea in a way that engages and enrolls people and gets them moving and thinking about something different, and it only takes you 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, then why wouldn't you do that? Right? It's so important for that clarity of message. When you think about all of this career and what's coming next, but looking back for a moment, is there a point in time or was there somebody who actually brought that awareness in that you have to get that balance between art and analytics for this success story that you've written? When did it become clear that the balance needed to be between the two?
Hmm. I think it's the inclination of the speaker in front of you. So some of them need the stats and data in order to get the certainty, clarity, and confidence. Some of them need I just want to create. How do we make sure this lands? I've got to meet them there.
Yeah, wherever they are.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily one or the other. I would say it's a ratio.
Yeah. How do you balance that?
Well, this is interesting because my family are all in creative. They're all like designers and
Oh, are they?
architectural. Yeah, yeah, and I'm the IT guy. So I'm kind of so I think I've always lived in that space. I didn't realize, for instance, how amazing great art was until I was standing in, I don't know, the Uffizi in Venice, sorry, in Florence, or seeing the Mona Lisa in Paris, that I realized that mastery and creativity at the same time.
Mm,
Mastery allows you to play,
yeah.
creativity allows you, well, sorry, mastery allows you to be precise, creativity allows you to play. Seeing those artists really draw that line that you were referring to earlier
Yeah.
that elevates our spirit to another level that keeps me both involved with TED, involved with the individuals I work with, and what I aspire to do for each and every interaction, whether it's my own or with my clients or with people I meet. Because it's that spark of life that moves us above the mundane and the repetitive and all the other silliness that goes on in the world.
I love that. Um, Saying that a lot in this conversation. um, when you think about this and we're thinking about moving forward, and I kind of touched on TED in the future, but what are you actually looking forward to in the future? TEDx coaching, communication, all the things that you do. What's got your attention? What are you excited about right now?
This is what's fascinating, especially at this point in time. We have technology that arguably will overtake humanity in its capability, scale, and speed. It's the first time in our species history, which basically means if everything that we hold dear in terms of productivity and effectiveness and adherence to certain rules or structures or protocols or whatever can be done faster, better by a machine, what is left for humanity? And so this fascination around what is it to be human, it's forcing us to think about that. And we start to reach into the interesting and I almost say philosophical parts of this. I remember me mentioning the two orders, the second order consequence. This is a really good example I like to give is currently AI is trending and everyone's kind of getting a bit excited by that. And yeah, okay. We did our first AI talk about 2016 and we've done it 3 times since and I have no plans of going back because we've done that. So the next thing is obviously quantum computing, which is interesting but not here yet. But what I discovered more recently is there is a lab in Melbourne who put 800,000 brain cells onto a computer chip. And within 45 minutes, it was able to work out how to play the 80s game Pong.
No.
So then we're suddenly forced to think, well, is that intelligence or is that response to stimulus? So do we need to redefine intelligence? Now, if we need to redefine...
I think I just got chills down my spine.
Yeah. Well, I'm not finished with the second order consequence. That's the first principle.
Oh, no. Okay. Okay, I'm here.
If you think about it this way, if it's able to recognize that, then it has a sense of awareness. If it has a sense of awareness, then it has a sense of surviving. If it has a sense of surviving, it has a sense of consciousness. If it has a sense of consciousness, then it has a sense of suffering. If it has a sense of suffering, it needs to have rights. And if it needs to have rights, then it needs personhood. Now,
wow.
A corporation is a legal person. There is an elephant in Canberra that has legal personhood. There is a mountain and a river in New Zealand that has legal personhood. We are literally, within probably 2 decades, going to create a self-aware, I don't know if it'll be sentient, but it'll certainly be self-aware, organic computer.
That just broke my brain. In a really, and not in a horror way, but just in a fascination way. Like you said, like, this is fascinating. This is literally fascinating. Is anyone beside you seeing this yet? Like, this is being talked about in
the people at this
communities
lab
the
totally
people?
are already talking about this stuff. That's why they're
And that's in
bringing it up
Melbourne.
now. Yeah, it's in Melbourne.
When are you bringing him up?
September 24 is our next event. He's on our stage.
Yeah, they're coming to Melbourne.
Yeah, Hongwen is going to be on our stage talking about this, well, talking to this, not specifically about this, because we need to think about this because basically in 2 generations, human generations, so maybe 50 years, we might not need the silicon. In which case, we've created an entirely new species that didn't follow evolution.
And how do you actually follow the second order consequences of that?
This is the bit that's interesting. How do we coexist with that? Do we need to control that? If it can have a logic and a capability and an ability to self-organize faster than humans, what does it mean for the survival of our species? This is where we start to talk about transhumanism, where people actually become part of the big electronic world, which won't be actually be a silicon chip. It'll actually be some sort of organic substrate.
I don't think I've ever pushed into that conversation in my life. And obviously because it's new, but I love that. Actually, I really got so much. No wonder why you're humbled to be part of these conversations. Like, no wonder why you're humbled.
I get to talk about the future and see the possibility of that, potential of that. And these people, I mean, they're more passionate about it than anyone.
Yeah.
Passion's a bit infectious, right?
Yeah.
Can't
You're
not be
literally just
excited.
doing a walking, talking education lab for yourself. Like, literally. Yeah, love it. So then when it comes to I'm actually going, because we are going to have to wrap it up. And there's a couple of quick things I'd love to know. For those listening to this and thinking, like, we just broke their brains as well. Let's bring it back to center. In the everyday, what are the great ideas that you're seeing at the moment that are still worth? So we have that at one end of the spectrum. If you think about this next stage coming up in September, is there any ordinary everyday ideas? And I don't mean because they need
Yeah,
to be
I know.
worth sharing,
I
but do
know.
they come up from the ordinary moments?
Look, I think all our idea, any ordinary idea has the potential to be remarkable. That's why people go, well, have I got a TED talk? It's like, probably, but how clear is in your head? How clearly could you communicate that? And could you help people understand the second order consequence? I think all ideas have that potential.
Yeah, I love that. So for those that have got on their bucket list, looking at vision board as they're listening to this, um, feel like their life won't be complete if they don't deliver their TEDx talk, what's your advice?
Ooh, I think work on getting that clarity. I think without that clarity, it's hard to be both precise and succinct. And they are characteristics of TED and TEDx talks that probably aren't as necessary in, say, a full keynote, but are absolutely not negotiable when someone can close the video on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Jon, on that note, I'm going to have to close the audio on us. I have so enjoyed this conversation. I could talk all day. I'm glad we're not in the same room because we're probably pulling up your spreadsheets and your data and your analytics and your reports because it is fascinating. Thank you so much for giving us your time and a glimpse into the world of what actually creates the power and the magic behind a TED Talk.
No worries at all. Thanks for inviting me. Good to chat.
Thanks, Jon.
Bye.